Global urgency on sustainable solutions, digitally connected infrastructure, and rapidly advancing novel technologies has ushered aerospace into an exciting period of innovation, arguably not experienced since the dawn of aviation. Join us as we explore today's dynamic industry with distinguished visionaries, changemakers, policy creators, and the innovative ideas that are cultivating new frontiers across aviation, space, and defense. This is Wheels Up, the future of flight, with Alex Ramirez.
Welcome to our latest episode of Wheels Up, Future of Flight. I'm your host, Alex Ramirez, President, Culinary Group. It's an incredible time in aviation, space, and defense as the industry reimagines itself with new and novel technology in areas like sustainable aviation, advanced air mobility, and commercial space travel. The advanced air mobility, or AAM sector, is an emerging aviation ecosystem leveraging revolutionary new aircraft and technology, paving the path for a future airspace that is scalable, accessible, safe, and sustainable for all. The Advanced Air Mobility Institute is an international nonprofit research center dedicated to educating and advocating for the broadest public benefit through the AAM ecosystem globally. Ultimately, the AAM Institute is committed to protecting people, their rights, and the systems our society relies on. The community seeks to accelerate access to these new technologies in an ethical and responsible way. Today, we're joined by Dan Sloat, founder and president of the Advanced Air Mobility Institute. With over 15 years of professional and military experience spanning aviation, humanitarian aid, supply chain logistics, public safety communications, and entrepreneurship, Dan is passionate about leveraging his skills and knowledge to promote smart tech policy for the common good and help the advanced air mobility organizations navigate the unknown. Thanks, Dan, for joining us today. Super excited to have you. Welcome.
Alex, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So can you share a little bit about your own history in the aviation industry, Dan, and your service with the U.S. Air Force and the genesis behind the AAM Institute?
Absolutely. You know, I think this is something quite relatable to, people around the globe, a fascination with aviation from a very early age. I was fortunate enough to be born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, and we have the moniker of Air Capital of the World due to the extensive aviation history and building many of these aircraft. And so, I mean, it seems like just about every one of my friends, right, their father or mother worked at the aircraft factory. This was very much in our blood from an early age. And of course, Kansas has loads of aviation pioneers. Amelia Earhart was a role model of mine early on. At junior year of high school, I decided to apply for a scholarship with the Air Force ROTC. That was an excellent opportunity. It was kind of a case, Alex, like, I felt, okay, I'm a little bit smart and I'm a little bit athletic, but certainly not enough to get a full ride academic or a full ride athletic. And that's really what we need for our militaries. We need individuals who are disciplined, who know enough to be able to accomplish the mission, but also have a good balance of understanding. Military service it can be very grueling, a lot of intense situations, and so I very much appreciate the opportunity to serve. I over the course of 6 years, active duty service, 3 deployments abroad. Felt very lucky to have had the chance to serve. I know an awful lot of guys. Some of the most phenomenal athletes I'd ever met get disqualified, right, over kind of some archaic policies. So while some people, they hear that I was in the military, they say I could never be yelled at, in their line of work. But I very much saw it as a privilege. I pursued a pilot slot originally, was able to get it, but made the tough decision to turn it down. You may know it's a minimum 12-year commitment. And at 19 years old, that felt, oof, that's, at the time, that's about as much memories as I had, right?
Wow.
So I went the route as an air battle manager. And what I did, adapted for civilian use today, UAS traffic management. That is a fundamental part of this exciting new field of advanced air mobility.
Absolutely. So can you share a little bit about the genesis then for the AAM Institute? I mean, what spawned founding the Institute and kind of the background behind it?
Certainly. So after the service commitment in 2015, it very much felt that a career in drones wasn't quite viable yet. It was still a bit too early. So I decided to go back to school. And I'd always had an affinity for business. I ended up pursuing a JD MBA. And I took a concentration of courses at the intersection of international business and human rights. That's something that I'm personally quite passionate about. And I learned about this relatively new mechanism called a multi-stakeholder initiative. And what I love about it so much is we say, okay, at its fundamental level, companies are not evil, but they do have a top line priority to maximize shareholder value. Unfortunately, in pursuit of maximizing shareholder value, there are times when companies, they sometimes it's about, playing by the rules. The rules better than your competitors, you can gain an advantage. But multi-stakeholder initiatives, in part, they look at that situation and say, okay, it is the case that it's possible to gain an unfair short-term advantage over your competitors if you, for example, expand into a country with laws that are a bit more lax, ones that don't quite align and fully protect human rights. But it's about bringing industry stakeholders together to say, hey, let's hold ourselves to a higher standard in concert with United Nations human rights. And in that way, we can avoid the devastating public relations hit of an eventual, right, either laborers that have been mistreated or disadvantaged, that they strike or possibly even sabotage supply lines. And I would say, rightfully so, right? They need to have their voice heard and their rights respected. And so an MSI, I think, is critical for this space. It's plainly too naive to assume that advanced air mobility will just kind of, on its own account, always protect human rights of people along the way. So we're hard at work at the AAM Institute trying to identify exactly what that code of conduct should be, and how can we ensure that we never lose public trust. This field is far too new, right? People are much more forgiving so long as they feel that the right that the right policies and practices are in place to make this something that we can all benefit from.
Absolutely. And now, Dan, the AAM Institute's 3 guiding principles, or its great segue, are safety, dignity, and security. So can you share a little bit more about how and why you chose those 3 kind of fundamental principles and what they represent? Certainly.
So safety, of course, is about protecting people in the physical sense. When we think about it, it's more than just in their future capacity as passenger on these eVTOLs, but also to include the just like we were discussing before the episode started, incredible use cases and effective tools in the hands of first responders, right? So it's very much a nod to trying to accelerate access to our public safety personnel so that they can do their remarkably difficult work of saving lives.
Yeah.
Dignity is about protecting people's rights. And that's the whole gamut, right? We touched on human rights, but it also accounts for environmental rights. We have an obligation, especially in the transportation sector, to be cognizant and make a concerted effort to reduce emissions. People have a right to clean air and clean water. And we also factor in civil rights. As I'm sure you'd agree, historically, there's been concerns, whether real or perceived, related to privacy and the use of drones. So it's important that we shore that up, so people, in the absence of knowing otherwise, don't fear these platforms unnecessarily. And then lastly, security. Of course, it's about the operational security, cybersecurity of these connected systems. But we also contemplate advanced mobility's impact on our educational system. We think that these technologies can be an excellent means to inspire the younger generation. Have something tangible, right? Do those, after school programs and demonstration flights, build a bit more excitement and help those young people really grasp to say, okay, if I take a little bit of time invested now in my STEM courses and try to master the math and sciences, I can be part of this exciting future. So kind of at its core, it's the three primary facets by which we think it's necessary to protect a person in the fullest sense.
I love that. And it definitely is a very inspiring sector that's coming up for the next generation, right? I mean, it's just this new world of possibility. So with that, Dan, one of the things that gets talked about a lot is, and you touched on it already, right, is how fast technology is moving. And, in an industry where regulation and standards and, is so important for both, human lives are at stake, like you mentioned, and safety is such a priority. What's your perspective on the challenges to harmonize regulation, standards, infrastructure to keep up, right? To make sure that we are keeping the public, safety in mind in all aspects, when you have so many private, government, and research institutions as part of this ecosystem, and what specifically is the AAM Institute trying to do to help bridge that gap?
Yes. So actually, just this morning, I was able to join in on remotely. I'm in my home in Boston right now, but was able to join remotely for the Arab Aviation Summit, a roundtable discussion that touched precisely on this topic. And it's frankly, I think enthusiasts and certainly industry insiders, we can get a bit of get ahead of ourselves, right? So eager and acting with such urgency to move this forward, that it's important that we bear in mind and show grace to our regulatory bodies, right? FAA, EASA, CASA down in Australia, and so forth. It's a case here where the regulatory bodies, certainly from a financial standpoint, they have nearly nothing to gain from type certifying these eVTOLs. And so they don't experience those same kind of incentives, of course. And yet, at the same time, if there were to be an accident, they're likely to bear the brunt of the blame. So they're in a very, very difficult position. And I think that industry really needs to be more forgiving, more patient and understanding at this careful balance that I genuinely believe they are trying to strike of, okay, how do we maintain this, nearly impeccable track record for safety, while at the same time not stifling innovation. And that's tough. That is an incredible challenge. And we need an awful lot more data and research to prove this up. So At this stage anyway, the Advanced Air Mobility Institute, our focus is on building awareness. It's just kind of human nature, right? That we are adverse to change. And I have to imagine the shift from relying on a highly trained, licensed, airplane captain to remote, and then the phase beyond that, fully autonomous. We're going to trust an algorithm. That's a big shift, and we need to give. We plainly need to give society as much heads up, advance notice to start to come to terms with what a monumental shift in the very nature of public transportation trust. So
absolutely,
we're building out a multi-stakeholder initiative toward that end.
So on that, you just touched on public awareness and how important that is. South by Southwest kicks off next week in Austin, and the AAM sector has been generating a lot of buzz as an emerging market in the show the last few years. Can you share a little bit more about the evolution that you've seen at South by Southwest over the last few years, and what has you most excited about this year, and plans for the AAM Institute to participate?
Sure. So South by Southwest Tech Conference, I mean, this is a gathering of some of the brightest, most enthusiastic, tech experts. And I mean, it's all things cool, right? If you want to know what's next, this is the place to go. I want to say this is my 7th year. And I plan on attending, indefinitely. This year in particular, and we've had a number of exciting panels year over year. Eve Air Mobility brought out their cabin mock-up that created quite a buzz. Jobin of Joby Aviation came out and did a interview alongside Delta Airlines, one of their close partners. You're exactly right, Alex. A lot of exciting buzz. This year in particular, the Advanced Air Mobility Institute will be hosting a day of programming along with about 25 speakers across 5 panels, a metaverse VR immersive, as well as a live drone light performance, and a keynote address from the commissioner of the Los Angeles Transportation Commission. It's going to be a very action-packed lineup. And we've got, of course, Dean from Collinear Group is going to be joining us. I'm particularly excited about hearing some of his insights, especially when it comes to firefighting efforts. That's very much aligned with one of our core programs that we're trying to promote: drones as first responders. It really is fascinating. The sheer multiplier effect for how much more effective our first responders can be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that should be a fantastic series of events that you guys are hosting, and I look forward to hearing all about it. Now, just tapping down a little bit on the public awareness aspect. Again, everybody in the industry right now realizes that entry into service for certification is the top priority, right? That's everybody's talking about. I mean, we already talked about it here. The pressure that the regulators are feeling to try to pave the way for some of these private companies to get to market. And we all, I think everybody recognizes there's a lot of risk there and how to manage that. But the public awareness, right? There's this assumption that the public's just going to accept, these flying taxis, and everybody's just. Do you agree that is equally, if not more, of a risk to the AAM market? And if so, what's the Institute doing to help mitigate that risk?
One of the things I find so fascinating is that perhaps I recognize I have, a different perspective, having gone to law school. There's something about the nature of law and regulation. It's of course often presented as like, this is the law. This is the law, right? It's never, oh, well, that's the law right now. We never talk about it in that way. But laws, of course, they're human made. We can adapt them however we need, however we see fit. In law, we have this concept of stare decisis, right? That if a judgment has been made, for example, on a constitutional matter, that the sheer extent and duration that prevailing wisdom had held, we should take time to honor that and really be deliberate about if we're going to make a shift, just what kind of change and what the foreseeable follow-on consequences are. But what I'm driving at here, Alex, is we can change the laws, right? Laws are actually not that hard to change, right? It really just comes down to willpower. Public acceptance, that is probably the furthest from a science, right? I mean, you've got such a strong core of, right, that idea of NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard. And I think in many ways, this idea of even just peace and quiet, right? We deal with a lot of hassle and frustrations in life. And many of us, after we've done, we put in our hours over the course of a week, we just want some peace and quiet, right? And so without the utmost assurance that this new transportation system is not going to be just a cacophony of, buzzing and whatnot, this is highly at risk. There's an incredible amount of education that needs to be done, and assurances made for communities that if we do launch these operations, that we will not utterly destroy what they look forward to so often, which is that bit of peace and quiet.
Absolutely. And, talk about, again, public acceptance and trying a use case, right? Volocopter is aiming to fly their eVTOL at the Paris Olympics this summer, again, for trying to raise public awareness and demonstrate the possibilities and really, demonstrate what the ecosystem could be. What's your perspective on the viability and the risk of trying to achieve this goal this summer?
So I have to imagine that the French Transportation Ministry at the national level, that they will find some way to at least carry out even purely ceremonial eVTOL flights. I'm sure you saw on the news that the local Parisian councillors, they're trying to do what they've been elected, which is stand up on behalf of residents there in Paris, to make sure that this that we go into this in a way that is equitable, that does benefit people broadly, and so I commend them for that. This is an incredible opportunity, right? I mean, this grand world stage to debut the technology and to show, potentially billions of people at the exact same moment. This is what we've all been working towards. This is not distant science fiction. This is something that brilliant aerospace engineers and scientists figured out. And I find that fascinating and deeply fulfilling kind of career to be a part of. We'll see what happens. I'll take the opportunity, on the point of public acceptance and really tying it into peace and quiet. I'll give a shout out to our friends and colleagues over at Whisper Aero, of course, led by founder Mark Moore. I mean, he's got the moniker as Godfather of advanced air mobility from his time previously at NASA. Absolutely instrumental to those early days with Uber Elevate. And I gotta say, Alex, from what I've heard, as far as this ultra quiet propulsion technology, it's a game changer. I mean, I don't think people can really, until they hear it firsthand for themselves, really don't have a firm grasp of just how what the difference will be between these aircraft with their technology as compared to a conventional helicopter.
Wow. Yeah, it's so exciting, Dan. I mean, all the innovation and technology that's happening at the rapid pace, right? I mean, how this thing, it feels like every week something in the news is popping up and it's like, somebody did what? And like you just mentioned, it's so fulfilling, right? To say, wow, this is incredible, and really sharing it with the public at large, I think is going to be really exciting once, technology really starts to hit the market.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've touched on, the tech, we've touched on regulation. We haven't really talked a lot about infrastructure, and let's be honest, we could probably do a whole episode on infrastructure alone, but it's something that, has been getting traction and attention, but it's like, oh yeah, that's an afterthought, right? As far as like, hey, once we get the tech out to the market, we'll figure out the infrastructure part. Now, you clearly have some experience as an executive in this sector. What do you see or feel is keeping executives up at night in the very important, infrastructure part of the ecosystem for advanced air mobility?
So there's been a fair amount of discussion that vertiports be exclusively sited at airports in the beginning, and even more recently talks of, hey, what if we only use existing heliports and we kind of just make that work in the meantime as this continues to scale up. Truth be told, if eVTOLs only ever make transfers between airports, we missed the mark by a mile. How have we increased access in any way, right? Because airplanes can already make those trips. Granted, it's we're very excited about the opportunity to decrease total carbon emissions, but that's an incredible amount of time and effort to not increase accessibility, right? This is we will have failed to reach the potential of advanced air mobility if it only remains at existing airports today. That being said, airport shuttles make an awful lot of sense, but of course, only if there's a vertiport, for example, at or around city center into the airport itself, right? It's plainly the case that people do not fly to an airport as their final destination, right? There's always some last mile to go. So it's important that we build out a vertiport network that reaches those more rural and remote communities, communities that have been historically overlooked and underinvested in. So the time to make good on that is now.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many aspects, right? I mean, to this ecosystem that, you got to make it all work together. It's, again, a super exciting time to continue to see all this innovation, technology, and ideas unfold. It'll be interesting to see what the vision looks like once it turns into reality, which, as you just mentioned, I mean, it's not that far away, right? So one of the questions that I love to ask, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but really want to just ask it more directly, is, your core principle of safety, right, of the AAM Institute. The technology industry's mantra has long been, for innovation, has been move fast and break things. And again, for an industry like ours, where human lives are at stake, what's your perspective on striking that right balance between safety and rapid innovation? Again, it's a tightrope we got to walk. How do you address that, or what's your perspective from an AAM institute perspective?
Yes, I was in part of a discussion just last week, and the point was raised that when we look at the the automobile industry, our highway systems, the truth is we are, because it's so relatable to us, right? We've all had a near miss or maybe hydroplane or slid on ice, right? When it's a person who's operating the vehicle, we are we're quite forgiving. We give the benefit of the doubt. We often assume that there was no malintent, because we can see ourselves in the in those other drivers. Turning to this one, as we remove the human operator, we are very, very harsh and critical, and I think that we should be. Right? I mean, why would we spend all of this time and money invested in systems that aren't that aren't categorically better than we are, right? That don't definitively decrease human error and its impact on safety. And I think that we need to always bear that in mind moving forward. That if you're building a mobile app, absolutely, right? Be first to market, try to grow the follower,ship, get the attention of a VC, maybe a millionaire by the end of the month. And along the way, I mean, you can work out the bugs. You can engage an incredible amount of feedback from your user base, see who takes a liking to it. But yeah, this is the kind of thing, just like you said, Alex, precisely because human lives are at stake, we cannot afford to have that same kind of attitude.
Yeah, it's a tightrope, and as you mentioned already, right, it's a tough place for regulators to be at, and even as private companies that are feeling a lot of investment pressure, right, to get to market and start to see some return on investment. So. But, I'm glad to see organizations like the Advanced Air Mobility Institute really helping to guide and advocate and making sure that we're doing things the right way for the public interest. So, Dan, we're coming to an end here. What's the best way for listeners to learn more about you, the Advanced Air Mobility Institute, and get in contact with you or your team if they'd like?
Yes. So our website, aaminstitute.org. My doors are always open. I can be reached at dan@aaminstitute.org. We've also got we're quite active on LinkedIn. We have, I think at last count, something like 140 volunteer members at the AAM Institute. We kind of treat the website as a global directory of AAM experts around the world. In fact, we now have representatives in as many as 44 countries on our board of liaisons. So, these are individuals who are helping us kind of keep a finger on the pulse. What is the evolving public sentiment towards this technology, and do our part. If there is some kind of, for example, an infringement on these rights, to use our platform and our voice to speak up on behalf of those communities, while at the same time, to the extent, for example, if a community, maybe a small child, has gone missing, and through use of UAS technology, thermal imaging, search and rescue personnel can find a missing child much faster than we ever have been before. And those are precisely the kind of stories that we would love to amplify, right? Make sure to illustrate to people, hey, on the whole, we really can make the world a better place.
That's really what this industry and this new market is about, right? Is how do we make the world a better place. So Dan, man, this is an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining. It's an incredibly exciting time for the industry, and thank you and the Advanced Air Mobility Institute for all your contributions for public safety, advocacy, awareness. We need more of this. So similar, anything I can do, our team can do for you and the organization, happy to help. Best of luck to you and the team at South by Southwest next week. Super excited to hear how that goes with Dean and everybody who's planning on participate. And thank everybody that joined us today. Please tune in for our next episode of Wheels Up, Future of Flight, as we explore today's dynamic industry with distinguished visionaries, change makers, policy creators, and the innovative ideas that are cultivating new frontiers across aviation, space, and defense. Until next time, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To capture all the latest from Wheels Up, Future of Flight, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes or visit us at collineargroup.com.